Dear friends, welcome to the session of our study circle. This is the 51st meeting of the study circle. For today's session, we have a very interesting resource person. Now I invite Mr. Vijayan to give an introduction and welcome the speaker for the session.
Mr. Ravindran is a senior advocate of the Madras High Court, and he started his career as an advocate under Mr. T.S. Gopalan, an eminent labor lawyer in Madras. And subsequently, he became a partner in the famous firm called T.S. Gopalan and Co. Mr. Justice Kalifullah was one of his partners before elevation to the bench. I know Mr. Ravindran for nearly 20 years, and it was really amazing to watch the cross-examination arguments by him in the labor court. You can never see him chit-chatting with other advocates in free time. Mr. Ravindran is an example of hard work and dedication, and hard work and dedication will take you to pinnacle. I was told that his car will reach in the office by 8:55 a.m. and you can set your time by looking at his car entering into the office premises. And I was told that he will work from morning 9 a.m. to evening 9 p.m. and 9 p.m. sharp he will leave the office. I also understand Mr. Ravindran will work 7 days in a week, and Friday was dedicated only for the purpose of reading, noting down case laws and updating his knowledge. Mr. Justice Kalifullah once said he had 3 big volumes of notebook, each run into 1,000 pages, and a part of it was converted into a book called Case Law and Domestic Enquiry, which is now more than 533 pages. Now you can imagine it is only a tip of an iceberg, and I was told that he is in the process of bringing more books from the knowledge he has accumulated all through these years. Welcome Mr. Ravindran to enlighten us on the emerging changes in labor law. Let us hear him without any more wastage of time.
Generous appreciation, Mr. Vijay. The labor law subject is concerned, it's in the concurrent list of the Constitution. Both central act as well as state laws rule the field. And as far as the central act is concerned, it was in 1982 wherein Chapter 5B was added, etc. Later on, small changes here and there were made both by central government as well as state government. Overall was long due, rather overdue. If you see the historical picture, in 1985 and on, Mr. Rajiv Gandhi was the Prime Minister who had almost 3/4 of the majority in the parliament and a substantial majority in the Rajya Sabha. Made an effort to overhaul the labor laws by bringing industrial relations bill. But unfortunately for that young Prime Minister, he got involved in Bhopal scandal, etc. And his term came to an end in a whimper. Later on, history never had an opportunity like that. But this government, which is on the second leg, is making an effort to bring it. Even in the last regime, it was brought in, but halfway through, it fell through because of various other important issues. But this time, they are determined to bring it. They are making an attempt from 2018 onwards seriously. Now 19 bill was introduced. Now that also lapsed, and 20 again they are bringing it. Before I dwell into the subject, labor law must be moving with the trend. It should move along with the society. Otherwise, it will become redundant. But since the labor law and the workman concerned is a very sensitive subject, the governments are not taking up matter seriously. They were just postponing it. While the employers were crying for a liberalization of labor laws, the working class is concerned, they wanted more liberalization in their favor. they were able to pinpoint the exploitation by the managements and lack of protection for their jobs, etc. They were also clamoring for overhauling in their favor. So it is a very difficult situation for any government to handle this critical subject. And somehow, I have seen for the past 40 years, the labor ministry does not deserve a high position in the government, is either in central or state government. I don't remember last good central government for labor laws. In state, at least I can remember Mr. Raghavanandam, Mr. Vidulai's father, was the best labor law lastly we had somewhere in 90s. Thereafter, we had a very lackluster persons on that portfolio. That's one of the reasons where it's not going on very radically. And if you read one judgment of Justice Mr. Anand Venkatesh, I do not know. He is, to my knowledge, he is not so familiar with labor laws. But in a case conducted by me and Prakash on certain issue, he was bold enough to say in his judgment, these labor laws are all archaic and they're outdated, and it is crying for a revamp. It is a very bold statement from a judge. Now, coming to the second part of this is as far as the legislature is concerned. As far as judiciary is concerned, since the legislation was not keeping pace with the change of needs, it is judiciary which propelled this law. Up to mid-70s, it was an evolution or having a firm foundation, etc. But from mid-70s, the remarkable judgments of one of the greatest jurists of our country, Krishna Iyer, changed the entire scenario. Though I appear for managements only, I can't stop praising Justice Krishna Iyer enough. In fact, during this COVID, I went through all his judgments and I was stunned by the originality of those judgments. I must say, without any hesitation, thereafter we have not come across any original judgments on labor laws after Krishna Iyer. Thereafter, to some extent, Chinnappa Reddy and Mr. Desai, etc. And his judgments were remarkable for its originality. For example, I will tell you the famous judgment of Bangalore Water Supply Board, 7 judges bench, which is now pending before 9 judges bench for its correctness. It runs about 127 paragraphs by him. Thereafter, Koshal concurred with him. All the 27 paragraphs were originals, original thoughts, not referring to judgments, cut and paste, etc. And that jurist had the authority to overrule 9 judgments of Supreme Court, including that of Chief Justice. He segregated the judgments into various parts. Why a club is an industry, why a temple is an industry, why an education institution is an industry, why a hospital is an industry, why a trust is an industry. One by one, it demolished all the case laws. And he referred to Mr. Mukherjee's judgment, which he accepted and he radically improved upon it. Thereafter, he gave remarkable judgments on Gujarat Steel Tubes, Sundaramani versus State Bank of India, then LIC versus Bahadur, Ribello, etc. It's all imprint is phenomenal. It is to that extent that in 82, I said the last overhauling took place. They wanted to amend the definition of industry, virtually borrowing Justice Krishna Iyer's judgment in the place of section 2J. But somehow it was not notified till date. Now Supreme Court is going to look into it. By now, the present code, which we are going to see it in the next few minutes, has virtually borrowed the judgment's principles. So that is the strength of his judgments. After Justice Krishna Iyer's retirement and etc., the pendulum has to always come to the other side. We all know between mid-90s or late 90s, the country moved towards liberalization. Dr. Manmohan Singh, Mr. P.V. Narasimha Rao government, Manmohan Singh. And the law also moved towards the direction. So what was a pro-labor trend became a pro-management trend. I don't want to name the judges. They started giving judgments more and more in favor of the managements. So it changed dramatically. So after 2005 or somewhere, again it came to somewhere middle. So we are somewhere in status quo now. So it is high time the legislature does its duty. And I must say this effort, whether it is going to satisfy the managements or it is going to satisfy the labor or not, it is an attempt. And it is a bold attempt. There may be certain shortcomings from view of the either side, but this is need of the hour. If we don't do it now, I do not know next election what will happen and who will rule the country. We may not get another opportunity. We should not miss this opportunity. I am all for change of labor laws, but I am not in change against the workman. I am not at all saying that. No country can prosper, I am sure, by exploiting the labor. History has never been so. If you exploit the labor or poor, it will lead to revolution. Therefore, we are very conscious that we should take care of the interests of the management. But what the interests of the management should also be looked into is only agenda. Now, about 29 central enactments have been very thoughtfully made into 4 codes. To that extent, they should be given pass mark, no doubt about it. And I'll take you to codes one by one, though Mr. Shiva said I should do on industrial code. I concentrating on that, I'll deal with the 3 other small codes also, just to complete the picture. But I must confess, what I'm going to spend for next 45 minutes or so is only a bird's view. Because if I go deep into it, it may take a couple of hours or more than that. And even in courts, I don't believe in arguing for such a long time, because people may not have concentration to listen to such a lengthy argument. So let my next few minutes also be crisp. And normally, I don't refer to any sections, provisions, act, etc. So that I go by as a story or as a narration. But this time I have to make an exception, because it is a legislation which is in the making. So I must refer to it. But I don't want the attendees to look at my face for next 60 minutes. So Mr. Shiva will provide the slides every now and then. I'll go to a corner so that it draws your attention, and my background voice, it should keep you interested. Mr. Shiva, you can come with the first slide. Next one. One second. The Industrial Relations Code is the first one. Earlier slide, Shiva. Industrial Relations Code is the first one. I spend some time on this. Why this important slide? Next. It amalgamate and simplify 3 enactments, which is the live wire of industrial relations. Forget about the litigation. As far as industrial relations are concerned, Shiva, still one. One is Trade Union Act, which is the most sensitive enactment, on which the law is very, very dormant. What we are in 1926, we are also in 2020. So it needs overhauling. Then Industrial Employment Standing Orders Act 1946. It also needs a major shuffle to see that how the conduct of the workman versus management takes place. The third most important enactment is called Industrial Disputes Act, which is the most litigant carrying dispute enactment. It is termed as industrial dispute wrongly. Now it is being corrected as industrial relations code. It should be an industrial relation, because the object of the idea itself was to achieve the object of settlement between the parties, not the dispute. So that's a misnomer. Now it is being corrected as the industrial relations code. These 3 enactments decide the fate of the industry as well as workmen in this country. Whether it is a foreign entrepreneur or an Indian entrepreneur, he says, what is this trade unions doing in our country? What is their rights? and what is their responsibilities. In the 1926 Act, there is very little, except to the extent of saying how it should be registered, what is the minimum strength, how the returns should be done, etc. Another next one is Standing Orders Act, which is critically service conditioned oriented act. What is the service conditions of the employees at a macro level? Forget about your appointment order. At a macro level, generally, what is the service conditions of the employees in an industry? How liberal it is, how stiff it is the most important aspect. Many of the actions of the management at the individual level or at a larger level depends on the implementation of the Standing Orders Act. Third is another crucial, equally important act or most important act, which is called Industrial Disputes Act, which resolves the disputes between the parties. The labor and capital and labor should live together. If there is a strife, okay, it is bound to be there. How it should be resolved? By way of a settlement, which is a primary importance of the enactment, if not by way of an adjudication. So these three enactments now made together, and in my view, I have not read very deeply number of times. I have read couple of times. I think it moves forward to great extent, but still there are shortcomings which I'll explain in my view. Number two, Shiva slide. As I said, the definition of industry has been made very clear. Now, in the 127 paragraph, this is the crux of Justice Krishnamaya's order. He said, where there is a systematic activity with the cooperation of the employer and workman for production, supply, and distribution of goods and services to satisfy human needs and wants, is what it ends. But the section includes with or without capital, etc. So now, practically everything is an industry. The Supreme Court said in 78. Now the law also says in 2020. So virtually every activity will become an industry. And once you are an industry, you get into at least these three enactments and other major enactments which I'll narrate to you. So we should be conscious. This is a very relevant amendment. It is timely needed, in fact. Let us not wait for Supreme Court decision on that. This is one thing. Next is the worker, definition of worker. We all know worker, we all think it's clerical and blue-collar worker, etc. No, it's not so. If you see the amendment, it includes technical, operational, clerical, skilled, unskilled, etc. But now, what is relevant in this definition is they included working journalists and sales promotion employees. Hitherto, they were not in a position to invoke the provisions of the ID Act, but they had a separate enactment called Working Journalists Act and Sales Promotion Act. But these were all no match to the Industrial Disputes Act. It's good those employees have been brought within the definition of worker. So the definition of worker has been expanded. It's a welcome sign. Let more people join the industrial relations. Next is wages. Now, this definition is practically a pro-management definition now. The earlier definition was every component paid indirectly or directly, various allowances were held to be wages. Now, if you all the three codes, it has reduced the impact of the wages. Now, it has excluded various allowances, and it is only based on this basic DA and retaining allowance or LTV wages. This is an amendment against the interests of the workmen, definitely, because without these allowances, their net wage will get reduced when they receive various compensations in terms of gratuity, Provident Fund, ESA, employee compensation. Everything will be reduced, and the retirement compensation, which is already very less, 15 days wages for each year, which is a pittance on a gross salary, will get further reduced. I don't know what is the logic behind this contracting of the definition. And the employers will tend to have more payment towards allowances. Already there is a complaint that the allowances are on a lopsided basic reduced so that it will not attract various competition. Now that itself was a litigation. Now legislation has approved the conduct of the environment. The workmen are bound to complain about this. Now this is another critical area. If you read it as it is, it will be a bit difficult to know why it is important. The threshold strength of seeking permission for layoff, retrench, closure, minor intention, as we fixed as 300 workmen, giving much relief to the industry. This is an understatement, actually. See, in terms of the 1982 amendment, for the first time, the earlier attempt failed. The government said if the industry is employing 100 or more workmen, they cannot unilaterally declare layoff or retrench workmen and close the industry without the permission of the government. This is the most significant part of that amendment. It's a significant pro-labor amendment. So there is no whimsical layoff, retrenchment or closure is the object. And it was challenged before the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has upheld it. So it has come to an end. But as the days went by, in 2000 onwards, or definitely from 2005 onwards, the economic activity in our country has changed, dramatically changed to a great extent. And the productions or production of goods or services has undergone a dramatic change. There is no question of a monopoly in our country on any goods practically. You take car, fridge, or a TV, or a washing machine, or a powder, or a cake, or a ice cream. Any product, there are multiple choices. Now, consumer has become the king. Now, there is acute competition in the market, now, which is good for the country. It is one positive view of an economic liberalization or capitalist country. It's one positive aspect of it, apart from other negative aspects. Now, the days of ambassador cars, Bajaj scooters, Fiats are all over, where we used to wait. Now, therefore, the trend which is started by the Japanese, the early 90s, which came to our country in mid 90s, and it has gone much beyond that. The concept called just in time, or now it has crossed that level, not just in time. If a car is manufactured, for example, it consists of, say, 700 parts. So Hyundai today practically manufactures only the engine, mostly through its robots. Will you believe all other parts are supplied from its what is called a tier 1 company and tier 2 company, including the complete body, braking system. So a car with 700 parts, the company Hyundai produces only 2 or 3 critical components. All other components should fit to in time. So there is no question of a shed or what we call as a place where stocks used to be kept and it used to be supplied, etc. Now, as the car moves from A stage, B stage to Z stage, when it comes out, it should go on get adding to it. So if that is the level of sync, minute second, you remember, you should know how we dynamics has changed. For example, client said we cannot stop our production even for 10 minutes. It will have an impact on the ultimate supplier. So a strike is something unthinkable in industry today, which cannot be accepted at all. Why strike? Even a shortage of labor due to absenteeism. Say, for example, Christmas comes on a Thursday, it's a holiday. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, many people go away. Prefix and suffix, even that cannot be tolerated in today's industry. Okay, this is a finer aspect of it. Now let's come to negative aspect of it. So a car manufacturer manufactures a new car and unfortunately it fails. So he will reduce the production immediately. So everywhere about all that tier 1 tier company have to reduce the production immediately from next hour onwards. Now what to do with this labor? No, I should lay off immediately actually. There is no work, I should lay off. Or if the, for example, this COVID situation continues like this, I have to retrench. Or a grave situation arises, by then my finances have gone drain, I have become negative or a cash loss company, I have to close. Now, if I have 100 workmen, I have to get the permission of the government. See, I can start the company, but I can't close it. I can't retrench. I can't lay off. Technically, realistically, all over India, to my knowledge, the governments have stopped giving permission for layoff, retrenchment, and closure. So this led to a situation where the companies decayed because of excess labor cost. Labor cost plays a significant part in many of the industries, including IT, BPO, etc. Now, therefore, there was a cry to get rid of this provision once and for all. Now, the government has come forward and increased it to 300. So, if my workmen are less than 300 on an average working day for the past 12 months, I can lay off, retrench, close as it is. But this will not satisfy the moment, because the definition of worker includes all type of workmen, including trainees, casuals, etc. So again, permission is necessary. So this is a big hindrance to the industry. This amendment, which is okay, better than nothing, has paved a way for a bit of relaxation. But there is bound to be opposition from the workmen on this. Yes. I don't understand this principle. They said 15 days wages when a retrenched workman, it should be deposited with the government, which is called as a reskilling fund. And this will be used for training the retrenched workers. I really don't know whether this is possible and it is feasible, it is worthwhile at all. A person is retrenched. I can at least understand this 15 days wages is given to workman who is retrenched. It will be of some use to him. To say that there will be a reskilled fund and retrenched workman will be trained is something I think is a dream which may not take place. I don't know what is the logic behind this amendment. This is based on this present COVID situation, because there is a raging controversy from 27th March to 17th May, when there was a lockdown officially announced under Disaster Management Act by the central government. The industries were all to shut down, and the employees or the general public were not to go out except certain restrictions. And the raging controversy before the Supreme Court is, can the Disaster Management Act have an overriding effect on labor laws? So as far as the amendments are saying, we have closed, therefore we will not pay. The workman is said, I am ready to work, you are closed, therefore pay full wages. And whether which is a special act in this situation, whether disaster management is a special act or provisions of the Industrial Disputes Act with providing for layoff is a special act, is a question before the Supreme Court. They have not answered it. They have postponed the answer by telling the workman amendment to say, negotiate and settle it. So this gives teeth to the provisions of the ID Act. And in this sort of situation, this will govern the field. And this is a need of the hour. Whatever may be good or bad, we should take it. And it fills the lacuna in the legal field on that. Next. Now the amendment, I don't know how far this will work. As it is, we are having number of labor codes. In Chennai, we have 3, Kanjipuram, Vellore, then Kadalur, Salem, Coimbatore, Hosur, Tirunelveli, this side, Kadalur, Nagapattinam, etc. They are working satisfactorily. In fact, there is less work. And we have an industrial tribunal in Chennai for state government and a central government tribunal at Shastri Bhavan for central government undertaking. Now, this amendment says that central government tribunals will be formed. Therefore, I wonder whether the labor courts will disappear. If central government tribunals form, will it be formed similarly in all the places, or will there be only one court? Then it will be a crowded one. The litigation at the state level, district level get amalgamated into Chennai. It's not the interest of the litigant public. I believe in the centralization of the judicial forum so that judicial justice at doorstep. And unnecessarily, I don't know, it provides for an administrative member along with the judicial member when then some expertise is necessary. I don't know what expertise is necessary, because as it is, the Act itself provides for appointment of commission or experts to be called for by the courts. I don't know what is the need for an industrial dispute in a non-employment case, or in a bonus case, or a charter demands case, or a layoff case. Where is the need for an administrative member? It is not a green tribunal which needs some specialized person. At the most, for bonus, auditors can come and give evidence. I don't know if there is an administrative member, there is a vacancy, or a judicial member, there is a vacancy. The judicial administrative system will collapse. I don't know how far this will function. We have to wait and see. Next is the fixed term employment. I don't know what is this fixed term employment. It enables the managements to employ a person for a fixed time, 2 years or 3 years contract. I must also tell the attendees the days of long-term employment or long tenure employment is no more there. It's a bitter truth. An employee cannot say like earlier days, I joined, I retired, I married my 3 daughters, 4 sons, I have 4 grandchildren, all by working in Binni, etc. We can't say that. For example, when you transferred an employee of Binni from Chennai to some place, he said, who is this man to do that? My great-grandfather, others, more than 100 years we are working there. So those days are all over. Now there will be short-term employment because of the, see, a company which came to me 2 years back with so much of enthusiasm, etc. Now it is no more, it's fighting for its survival. Wind energy, huge investments are made, now change of policy, etc. No, nothing is not there. So when the company's life as it is less than 10 years maximum, unless they move forward, the scope of employment being the long term is very, very remote. But it is sad, but it is inevitable. So it is a pro-employer amendment. You can have a fixed term employee. At the end of it, the employee will go away. There is no question of retrenchment on this. But to see that there is no exploitation, the benefits of a permanent workman should be given to him. So that even for a short duration, he will get all allowances, benefits, including gratuity, etc. So somewhere here and there, this amendment has worked for the interest of both sides, but predominantly in the interest of the management. Now 10 is strike. The strike, as far as today is concerned, strikes and locks out are 2 types. One is legal, another is not legal, or illegal, you put it blindly. In a nutshell, I can say all the strike in a public utility service is illegal strike. What is meant by public utility service is another definition. It is narrated and also by government order. So in public utility service, you cannot strike without 14 days notice and within 6 weeks. And once you give a notice, conciliation starts. During conciliation, you cannot go on strike. For example, milk is a public utility service. Newspaper, it is a public utility service. And power is a public utility service by definition as well as by notification. So a strike in a public utility service is always illegal. But in a strike in a non-public utility service, it is always legal because there is no question of 14 days. The illegality is very limited. Now, this amendment has radically got rid of this public utility service once and for all. It has got rid of illegal strike once and for all. So all these strikes and lockouts, both ways, they must give 14 days notice, which is mandatory. Once 14 days notice is mandatory, then the strikes, the strikers cannot go on or lockouts cannot take it. So in my view, it restricts the direct action by the employer and the employee, and it slows down the tendency to go on a strike or firemen to declare lockout whimsically. So it's okay. Let us see how it is looked upon by the employers and the employees. Number 11, this now we are slowly coming to the Trade Union Act. Trade Union Act is so outdated. For information, the first trade union in our country was started in Chennai. Madras Labour Union in Binni Mills is the oldest trade union in the country. So we can take pride of it. Even the next second union called Ahmedabad Mill Workers Union started by Gandhi was only subsequently. So such an important place. But Trade Union Act did not move forward. There are 2 issues. One is the employer does not want a trade union. technically. I don't accept it. Technically, it does not want a trade. Or if he wants a trade union, he wants to recognize a trade union. But there is no law in India except Kerala, West Bengal, and I believe in Maharashtra, MRTU Pulp Act. There is any law on trade and recognition of trade unions. You will be wondering why there is no law on recognition of trade unions. Because trade unions themselves are not ready to have a formula on that. Because trade union movement shifts based on a political activity in a country. So INTUC traditionally was there, now it is no more. So CA2 is now good, AA2 has gone back. DMK based on the who is in power, they hold the field. Therefore, they themselves were not wanting a law on recognition of trade unions. They were because afraid of their own strength. Now this act makes a forward thinking on that. It deals with, this is called formation of negotiating councils, where there is no trade union, the workman should not be left in the lurch. There must be a negotiation council, and that negotiation council should represent the workman and negotiate with the management on day-to-day activities, etc. This is a welcome step. I always believe there must be a representative for the workman so that their grievances are resolved. The next is very crucial. Now they provided a criteria for recognition of trade union as a bargaining need. Till now the law is, the Supreme Court said in FCA case, you can have an election to find out who is a recognized union, provided it is accepted by all the unions. Or there is a code called Code of Discipline, which provides for a recognition of trade union based on a check-off system. That is what is in the check-off system is where the membership of the union is verified by a third party, and that third party, which is having labor department's officials control, will verify the strength of each union, and union which is having 20% workforce at least would get recognition. For example, if it is 90-10, only one union. It is 40-40 and 23 unions. So that was also good. But that was a non-legal document. This is also court order. So it was not a good sign not to have a recognized bargaining agent. No, this law puts a plug into that hole, and it's a welcome amendment in my view. Now, it is a very minor amendment. There is hardly any dispute among the unions, but they were being resolved in civil courts. Now it has been brought to the jurisdiction of the tribunal. That's all the importance of it. Now, next 13, 14 is very relevant. See, hitherto, there are two types of disputes in our country. One is an individual dispute, what we popularly call as a 2A dispute. There the workman can challenge his non-employment, go to the conciliation officer, then come to court. But larger issues like charter demands, bonus, layoff, lockout, transfer has to be censored by a union, and it has to be referred by the government to the court. So government may refer or may not refer, then they'll have to be challenged by a writ petition, etc. Now this is a welcome amendment. Why should a larger disputes should be at the mercy of the administrative action? So this amendment says if a dispute is raised 90 days after receipt of the failure report, parties can go to the court straight away. So conciliation is always given a chance, no doubt it. Failure of which there should not be a dead end for the unions where there is no settlement or an adjudication. So this pays for an automatic adjudication process. It should be a welcome one by the unions, and the management should not complain about it at all. Because let them go to the tribunal and adjudicate their cases. Now 15, I am sure this section will be struck down, where the government is empowered to reject or modify an award of a tribunal. Already there is a provision under the present Industrial Disputes Act, which can refuse to notify an award in the Gazette, because only after the publication in the Gazette, 30 days later, an award becomes implementable. Now, Madras High Court single judge as well as a bench held that provision as unconstitutional. Now, to say that the government will modify or reject an award of the judicial order, I don't know whether it will stand the test of law. This is another provision which is a big hitch as far as the amendments are concerned. But it remains to stay, which is section 33 of the earlier proceedings. During conciliation, we cannot alter the service conditions, whatever may be the justification. Very cruel section, but it remains even in the present enactment. Yes. 17. This is another enactment which remains, provision which remains. Practitioner cannot be represented in a labor court without the consent of the or with the leave of the tribunal, which is earlier section 36. It remains in this code also. So there is a restriction on an advocate. Now 18 is making it clear, because right from 1975 there is a controversy. What is the jurisdiction of the civil court in labor matters? No doubt in 75 Supreme Court in Premier Automobiles clarified it and laid down 4 principles. Still there is a issue whether it is an implied bar of labor matters in the civil court jurisdiction. Is it only restricted to labor enactments per se? For example, Industrial Disputes Act, you cannot adjudicate in civil court. Standing Orders Act, adjudicate civil court. Transfer, if it is pursuant to standing order, the civil court has jurisdiction. Termination, whether reinstatement, etc. Now this amendment makes it once and for clear, makes it obvious the civil court jurisdiction is outstead in respect of matters which are specified in the code. 19. Now, therefore, I picked up these 18 points to show what is the impact of the present code. These provisions once and for all takes care of Trade Union Act, Industrial Disputes Act, and Standing Orders Act. These 3 enactments will stand omitted once this act finally passes through the test along with the bill. So this is the Industrial Relations Act code, which is the most important amendment. Now I'll run through 3 smaller codes. This is code on wages. It consolidated law relating to wages and bonus. Now next, it takes care of the fixation of minimum wages. Minimum wages is a very critical component in any industrial relations, because the law is no employer can pay wages to workmen which is less than the minimum wages fixed by the government time to time. Now, what is the minimum wages itself is a matter of raging controversy. In the case of Raptagas Bread in 1992, Justice Kuldeep Singh made a remarkable statement, a judgment, which said, who said, for example, the minimum wages criteria fixed is itself is less than minimum wages. He said the criteria is so outdated that it should be reoriented. And therefore, now they have added some flesh into these minimum wages, which says they will take care of the skill of the worker, which was not at all considered. Whether it is skilled, unskilled, semi-skilled, or highly skilled, that will have a bearing on the fixation of minimum. Geographical area, which is already included. So this another new area is arduous work, hazardous occupation, underground work, etc. So these elements will have an impact on the fixation of minimum wages, which is a welcome change, which was not there earlier as it is. Now, you all know in fixing minimum wages, they only fix the minimum wages, there is no minimum working hours. You all know as a matter of fact, for example, in security service, 12 hours is the norm, though 8 hours is prescribed. 12 hours is the norm, because minimum wages does not provide for hours. No doubt the Shops Act provides for it. Now these minimum wages fix the hours of work itself for getting minimum wages. So to extend it will reduce the exploitation of labor even in minimum wages. So this is a welcome amendment in my view. Now this is 21 is see, many a time what happens is when a retrenchment takes place, 22, sorry, Shiva. Except in a case of retrenchment where it is a must, the full and final settlement of workmen is not made promptly because there is no mandatory provision except retrenchment. So it is delayed. So this provision makes it clear that within 2 days, all his other legal dues should be credited to his account, to some solace to the dismissed workman, not a significant amendment as it is. 23, here it is nothing but a repetition of the earlier enactment, where nature of fines and deductions have been prescribed. This is another amendment. 24 is relevant because we know in service law, the principle is equal pay for equal work. but that principle per se does not apply in labor enactment. Because, for example, a clerk doing different type of clerical work or doing the same work because of educational qualification, etc., they will get different wages. And it is perfectly permissible, nothing wrong in it. But now they introduce the term same work or work of similar nature has been defined, where the skill, effort, experience, and the responsibility are same, performance under similar working conditions, then they will get the same wages. This is nothing but borrowing from the Constitution bench of Supreme Court, which clarified what is this equal pay for equal work by referring to about 50 and odd various judgments of the Supreme Court. So this should be in favor of the workman, and it should be a pleasant one for them. Next one is 25. There is already an enactment on that Equal Remuneration Act, which prohibits discrimination based on sex. So now they are clarified, not only there should be a prohibition or distribution based on the gender in respect of wages, but even in the realm of doing the same work, similar nature, there should not be any discrimination. There should be a welcome change in favor of the workman to some extent. Now we will move on to 26, which is now we are dealing with a Bonus Act. 5 years infancy protection, which was already there, has been redefined here. There's nothing too dramatic about this. Now 27, the disqualification for bonus. It's a minor amendment, but they have added the disqualification, including sabotage of property, conviction for sexual harassment has also been added for bonus. So if you sexually harass a woman, you will not get bonus apart from losing your employment. That seems to be the message. Anyhow, next is 28. 28 is nothing new. Minimum bonus of 8.33 and maximum bonus of 20. Then 29, here there is some change. Now, apart from the authority who decides all these matters, minimum wages, payment of wages, bonus, etc., there is an appellate authority to these enactments. So, only in PW, Payment of Wages Act, there is an appellate authority, and Gratuity Act, there is an appellate authority. Other is for minimum wages, bonus, apart from the labor code, we have to come to the High Court. Now, appellate authority is a good sign, so that the rushing to the High Court and pendency for many years will not be there. So it's a good amendment to that extent. So this code, next Shiva, 30, takes care of Wages Act, Minimum Wages Act, Bonus Act, and Equal Remuneration Act. These are all comparatively minor enactment, but anyhow it has been codified thoughtfully. So all four together go together. Next is Code on Social Security. Social security is an important aspect in respect of labor in India because of the wages which is getting, which is mostly above minimum wages and less than or around fair wage. The next level is living wage, which the workman normally does not reach. But we do not know, we know what is meant by minimum wage, but we do not know what is fair wage or a living wage. It depends on the various criteria. Now, these laws take up when the minimum wages and fair wage is not at all given. Now, social security measures should take care of the interests of the workman. Otherwise, he will be in great trouble. Therefore, they already have a ESA Act and EPF Act. Now, there is a single social security organization, Board of Trustees, which will take care of the Provident Fund organization's interest. Now, I am sure this will liberalize the slow-moving bureaucratic approach in the present EPF organization. Now, some of the amendments in these enactments is worth reading. 32. It shows there is some forward thinking in the legislation, which is a welcome sign. 2 new definitions have been added: gig worker and home-based worker. When I read gig worker, I was taken aback. What is this gig worker, which I have never heard? Immediately I saw the Google and I knew now what's the meaning of it. 33 defines a gig worker. So all informal workmen now come into labor enactment scenario. That's a welcome sign. More people come into it. 33 Shiva. A gig worker means a person who performs work or participates in a work arrangement and earns from such activities outside the traditional employment relationship. I can give any number of illustration for gig workers. For example, arranging parties, marriage parties, or a get together, or a movie premiere, or organizing these webinars in a bigger scale. So an informal work for which he gets his earnings, but it is not having a traditional employer-employee relationship. Now these gig workers now will get the protection of social security is the important thing. So therefore, now we have to be very careful when we arrange our affairs that informal workers will be added into the labor security, social security, and we should arrange our affairs. But the best part of this is, if you look at it positively, those gig workers or the next definition show, they will get the Provident Fund, they will get ESI coverage, which will take care of their injuries or death, in the event of death, their family member interest. So this is okay, good sign. Next is home-based workers, means a person engaged in the production of goods or services in the home or premises, his choice, and earns remuneration without his employer providing equipment, materials, and for example, I can take a simple illustration. The domestic worker, for example, they come and work in your place, or a person who works for a particular period based on your home needs, informally, where he produces goods and services in home or premises of his choice at his home. You tell him that you have to manufacture or produce X number of items. Then he also comes under labor laws protection. So this is a really forward one, but it may shock the traditionalists. Now, for example, in UK, the court have declared that the drivers of the taxi, what is this famous taxi? Ola and other one? Uber car services, the drivers hitherto were considered to be not employees. The UK court gave a declaration they are employees of Uber. So this is some sort of an amendment in favor of the workman. Next, you will find another important new definition, platform work. Defined as a work for employee in which organization uses online platform to accede individuals to solve their specific problems in exchange of payment. So online work by professionals is also now included in the definition of employees. So this type of platform work, probably a person who is doing webinar, what we call as administrator, he will become a worker hereafter based on this definition. Now you see the next definition, 36. Platform worker has been defined as a person who engages platform work. So whoever does the platform work online, he becomes a worker and he will get the benefits of social security measures. Then see the next one. Self-employed worker has been defined as a person who is not employed by the employer but engages himself in any occupation. So as self-employed, a plumber or an electrician or a carpenter, so he comes and works in a premises, then he also becomes a self-employed worker and he is getting various benefits. These are all very far-reaching definitions which have been included. Then kindly see the next one, 38, wage worker, defined as a person employed for remuneration in an under-organized sector, employed for one or more employers, including workers employed in household, including domestic workers. For example, a person will be employed under more than one work management. He may work for 8 hours here, 4 hours there. So he is also brought under the definition of worker. So a wage worker includes a person who is having more than one employer. Most importantly, be careful. Your domestic workers are all hereafter domestic servants, which you called as servants, are now wage workers. So their affairs also be governed by the labor laws now. Now this enactment, this code takes care of 39. Employee Compensation Act, Insurance Act, Provident Fund Act, Employment Exchange Compensation Act. So this takes care of 4 enactments. 5 maternity, 6 gratuity, senior workers, building, unorganized. So it takes care of 9 enactments, though I have not dealt with maternity and other things because there is nothing dramatically changed about it. Now this is Social Security is a forward-looking enactment. where the definition per se alone I have taken shows there is a trend to include more persons, more population into labor enactments. Next is D, Occupational Safety, Health, Working Conditions Code 2020. This is the last code I am dealing with it. This consolidates law relating to occupational safety, health, working conditions, and persons employed in establishments. Actually, it takes care of the Factories Act, etc. I'll show you. Now you see the improvement on this. Factory means we are thinking only manufacturing activity. Now you see, audio visual worker is defined as a person who is employed in connection with audio visual production, including actor, musician, singer, anchor, newsreader, or a dancer, or to do any work including artistic otherwise. So the TV's channels which you are now watching, wherever whoever is involved in that production activity, now you will come within the definition of audio visual worker, and you will get the benefits of various social security measures. This is keeping a trend with the legislative activism, which I say, I really welcome all these thoughtful amendments. Now they amend, once he is an audio visual worker, then they are next 41 Jiva. They have defined who is a producer. Means a person by whom arrangement is necessary for production of such audio visual or undertaking. So producer now will be responsible for the persons mentioned in item number 40. So an employer-employee relationship is formalized, which was hitherto not done. So it is a right direction. Then 42, electronic data processing unit or computer is excluded from the definition of industry. To some extent, it is an improvement. Already data processing units were held to be not factory. Now they included computer units. So hitherto we were already thinking that BPOs and IT industries were all factory or not. This puts an end to that doubt. They are not factories. Now this next is code provides for occupational safety, healthy working conditions, welfare, hours of work annually, which is nothing but earlier legislation. But what is very important is I put it in the bracket as notified by the appropriate government. Now in the present Factories Act, it's all legislation. To some extent, exemptions can be granted by the government, subject to the rule making power and the administrative power, and that power is also restricted. For example, overtime exemption can be granted from present 54 to 75, not beyond that. So now this has now become virtually an executive portfolio now. I don't know whether it is good or bad, only time will tell us. In respect of various matters, it is not by amendment or legislature, it is left to the appropriate government. So if you want the working hours to be fixed at 48 hours a week, government will notify it. If it is 50 hours, government will notify. There is no need for amendment. It can be good or it can be dangerous. Only we will know who is going to deal with it and how he is going to deal with it. So it's a very tricky amendment. Let us see how it works. Next amendment is subsidiary work. This is also a good one, where a work is done in connection with transport of vehicles, including payment of cash, handling, service sheets, etc., where what we normally call as subsidiary work or what is it, back office work. Back office work. Commercially, we say as back office work. That is also now brought within the scope of the labor legislation. So persons who are in the background of various activities, they will also be within the scope of the social legislature measures. Now, 45 is an important amendment. Period of mere attendance. There is a thinking that a person who simply sits without work, though his working hours are there at the disposal of the management, whether his period of work should be reckoned or not, this takes care of it. Period of mere attendance means a period during which a person remains at his post solely in order to reply or possible calls or to resume action whenever is necessary. So he may sit idle most of the time, but he will be on an attendance. This clarifies the doubt. What is the working hours of an employee? 46. This provision was already there in Factories Act, and the Madras High Court held it is unconstitutional, but again they have brought it here. In the sense, the women worker cannot be employed from 7 p.m. to 6 a.m. That is what we normally call as night shift. Night shifts, women employees have been prohibited from working. There are many more sections in it, but there is nothing dramatic about it. That's why I have not dealt with it on that. This code takes care of many enactments. So Factories Act, Mines Act, Dock Workers Act, Building and Other Construction Workers Act, Plantation Labor Act, Contract Labor Act, Interstate Migrant Act, Journalist Newspaper Employees Conditions Act, Working Journalist Act, and also Motor Transport Act. Sales Promotion, BD and cigar workers, and cine workers. So virtually 29 central enactments have been brought under the 4 codes. The first code deals with industrial relations. The second code deals with wages. Third code deals with the service conditions. And the fourth one deals with the miscellaneous provisions act. After reading this more than once, if you ask me, what is your view? Is it good or bad? I feel it's a mix. And it is a good change. Certain amendments have gone. I won't say in favor of the workman or in favor of the management. It has moved the changing times, no doubt. But there is bound to be complaints on either side. And these new definitions and the functioning of the tribunals may need interpretation also. So there is bound to be some higher level of litigation which is bound to be there whenever a new legislation is enacted. Apart from that, I should say generally these courts, if they pass through the test of time by amendments in both houses, then rules, then president assent and notification, they should assure a new era in industrial relations. But I have already seen write-ups by various persons on social media complaining about the present minimum wages not being good enough for the present day employer-employee relationship, etc. It's bound to be there. But I'm sure in the course of time, again, legislation will take the reins and move forward. This moving forward itself is a good sign. That it has taken place itself is a good sign. If it overcomes all the difficulties, okay, fine. Then the legislation will definitely take care of it and move it faster. I have given a bird's eye view of this, and I have stuck to my schedule of 1 hour as I promised in the beginning. Thank you so much for your listening. I am grateful to Study Circle, Mr. Shiva, and Mr. Om Prakash ji, who has been tirelessly conducting webinars. 51 is a great number. And I must say, before I end, these 4 months have been very rewarding period for me in the sense of learning process. 4 months I have not gone to court. I have done little work on litigation front by attending virtual court. But till date, I never found that I have no work to do, I am bored, etc. Because I must concede, and I am happy. These webinars keep us agile. The webinars, listening to the webinars live or later on by YouTube recording. Personally, I feel how little I know in law, and that there is a lot to learn on this. Therefore, I take this opportunity to thank the study circle team for asking me to make a presentation on labor laws. And I also thank all the attendees for 1 hour of their precious time being spent listening to me. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, sir. It was a very nice, wonderful insight as to one of the most forthcoming legislation. In fact, of all the webinars, this is the only session where we had some thoughts on a likelihood of a law which is to come in place.
Yes. Yes.
And as you rightly said, sir, though this 4 months period had been very tough on many fronts, It had been very useful in terms of learning experience. As lawyers, it is always learning which brings in more out of us, and it had been helpful in that thing. Thank you very much for having your wonderful
Thank
time.
you so much.
And there had been compliments in the chat box, and many of the participants had thanked you very much for the wonderful session. And if anybody wants to have some queries to be clarified with sir, or some doubts, or to add on to whatever views, you can
Yes.
use the option of your hand raise so that Mr. Sivashanmugam will unmute you. There had been one query in the chat box, sir. I'll put it for others can.
Yes.
In your opinion, will this code support ease of doing business or bring in more investment, generate employment?
To great extent, yes. To great extent, yes. If only that permission provision is removed, I will say hands up. But for that permission provision, no doubt it from 100 it has gone to 300, but still it is a big nuisance value. But on the whole, yes, this should be a positive information to the employers in general. But when I say positive to the employer, it does not mean it is negative to the employees. On the whole, it is a welcome amendment. Yes.
Thank you, sir. There is one more query which says, are the domestic workers not being captive? Should they be covered under the Social Security enactment, and could they proceed against their employer before the legal forum?
Yes, it's time to do that. It is time to do that. In Western countries, it's already there. See, for example, in Karnataka, minimum wages are increased for domestic workers. So let us bring them under formal working conditions. There is nothing wrong in it. If you employ an employee at your home, treat him as an employee and you be an employer. We should move forward. We should march forward. It is not olden days of giving some remuneration, one salary during Diwali, some breakfast in the morning, and give them 500 rupees per month. The days are over, and we should get rid of all these things. Yes, they should be given. They are due.
Sir, Mr. Vijay Srinivasan has raised his hand. We have unmuted him.
Good evening, sir. This is Vijay.
Yes,
it's a very insightful session, sir. Thanks for the session. My query is that actually the freelancers are covered under gig worker definition. So most of the occasion we will be having freelancers from on-site. They will be working from Europe or they will be working from Germany. And however, amendment in the social code will be applicable to them, sir.
See, one thing is very clear. This applies only to Indian workers. The
Fine,
only provision which deals with international workers is under the Provident Fund Act, which provides for provision for Provident Fund. Otherwise, international workers, abroad workers, you can safely say it does not apply. It is applied only to territory of India and Indian people.
Sir, but in this case, they will not covered under the definition of worker per se, sir.
Per
because,
se, yes.
Yes.
Per se, because the definition is so wide.
Yeah.
Yes, the definition is so wide, but it should be read, or it should be read down, saying within this territory of India are Indian employees.
Fine, sir. Fine, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
So there is one more query which says whether contractual labor is covered under the code. If not, then why, sir?
They are covered. I have not dealt with it because there is already Contract Labor Regulation Act, which comes within the code, third code. They are very much there. There is no dramatic change in it. That's why I have not done it. Because otherwise, for each code, I have to take a session.
Thank you very much, sir.
Contract labor are very much there. Yes.
We are almost coming to the end. May I invite Mr. V.K. Raja, advocate, to just give a vote of thanks to you, sir.
Good evening, sir. On behalf of the study circle, I thank all of the listeners who have come joined the webinar. Wonderful day. And the senior counsel had taken us through the evolution of the law from right from the enactment mid 70s, and thereafter how the judgments of Justice Krishna Iyer has shaped the labor laws, and next moving on to liberalization in the 90s, which made a forward of to the present code, and how this present code would literally wipe off 29 central acts and bring in a change to the labor force. Thank you, sir. We also share your thought that how little we know about the law when learning things from others. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.